You actually believed that inheritance was coming to us. Clean, Olivia. My husband and his coworker reviewed the hospital files last week. They expose exactly how your family's promises were built on decades of fraud. Your family's name has been hiding behind that polished reputation in this community for years, and the money was supposed to fix it all for us. Sign the transfer today, or I'll make sure the entire private development knows the truth about your family's dirty secrets and how you're the one standing in the way. Hi, my name is Olivia Parker. I am 32 years old. That conversation with my husband hit me like a wave I never saw coming, even though I had felt the undercurrent for months. We were standing in the kitchen of our house in the private development near Bend, Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business but pretends they don't. The mountain air outside was crisp, but inside the room felt thick with something heavier than the argument itself. My husband had always been the steady one, the one who made me feel safe after long days at the community health center, where I worked coordinating patient records and compliance. But in that moment, his voice carried a cold edge I had never heard directed at me before, and it cracked something open inside my chest. I stood there, fingers still wrapped around the edge of the granite island, trying to steady my breathing. The inheritance had always felt like a quiet promise from my grandparents, something set aside to honor the life they had worked so hard for, not a tool for anyone to rewrite our family story. My husband had known about it from the beginning. We had even joked about how it could be a fresh start for both of us. But now his words were painting a completely different picture, one that involved his coworker, Amanda Klein, digging through hospital files that had nothing to do with her department at the real estate firm where they both worked. I felt my throat tighten as I searched his face for the man I had married 6 years ago. "What are you talking about?" My voice came out softer than I wanted, shaky with the vulnerability I couldn't quite hide. I had always been the one who kept things calm, who double-checked every detail at work so no patient's records ever slipped through the cracks. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way that made my stomach twist. He crossed his arms, leaning against the counter like he was explaining something obvious to a child. "You've been dragging your feet on this for months, Olivia." Amanda pulled some strings and got us a look at the old medical files tied to the trust. "Your grandparents weren't as clean as everyone in this community thinks. There are discrepancies, loans, hidden accounts, the kind of fraud that could unravel the whole family name if it came out now." The mention of Amanda Klein made my skin prickle. I had met her a few times at company events, polite smiles and small talk, but nothing that explained why she would be involved in our private family matters. My husband kept going, his tone shifting into something almost pleading, yet laced with that same sharp insistence. "We're not stealing anything. We're just making sure the money does what it was always supposed to do, support the family. My parents have been counting on this too, you know. My father-in-law and my mother-in-law have put their own reputation on the line hosting those community fundraisers. If the truth about your side comes out, it affects all of us." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not from anger, yet but from the raw hurt of realizing how deeply this had been discussed behind my back. Loyalty had always meant something different to me, showing up, being honest, choosing each other even when things got messy. But in that kitchen, listening to him talk about the family like I was an outsider to my own inheritance, I felt the first real fracture. I wiped my eyes quickly, not wanting to break down completely. "I need time to think about this," I whispered, my voice barely holding together. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck, the way he did when he was frustrated but trying not to show it. "Don't take too long. Amanda has the paperwork ready and the community association meeting is next week. Derek Lawson is already asking questions about the trust because of some old liens that surfaced." That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the quiet of the private development outside feeling heavier than usual. My husband had turned over and fallen asleep quickly, like the conversation had been nothing more than a minor disagreement. But inside me, everything was churning. The next morning, I did what I always did when things felt out of control. I went to work early at the health center, burying myself in patient files and compliance reviews. Hannah Torres, my trusted colleague and closest friend there, noticed right away. She pulled me aside during our morning break, her voice gentle but direct. "You look like you haven't slept. Everything okay at home?" I hesitated, then told her the broad strokes, the inheritance, my husband's sudden pressure, the mention of hospital files, and Amanda Klein. Hannah's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. That doesn't sound right, she said quietly. Medical files tied to a family trust. That's not something a real estate coworker should be accessing. If you want, I can quietly check a few things on my end. No pressure, but something feels off. Her words stayed with me all day, a small anchor of support in the middle of the growing unease. By the time I got home that evening, my husband was already on the phone with someone, his voice low. I caught the tail end. Yes, Amanda, the documents are almost ready. Olivia's coming around. He hung up when he saw me and offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Hey, I made dinner. We can talk more if you want. But the conversation that followed was the same loop the family name built on fraud, the need to secure the inheritance quietly before anyone in the private development found out. The way my father-in-law and my mother-in-law were already worried about how it would look if things dragged on. I felt my chest ache with the weight of it all. I had always tried to be the one who kept our marriage steady, who overlooked small tensions because I believed in us, but this felt like more than a disagreement. It felt like my husband was choosing a version of our life that required me to hand over something deeply personal without question. Over the next few days, the pressure built in quiet ways. A text from him during my lunch break reminding me that Amanda had found more discrepancies in the old hospital records. A casual mention over dinner about how Derek Lawson, the community association president, had asked about our financial standing because of some upcoming development approvals. Each one chipped away at the trust I had placed in my husband, leaving me feeling more exposed and alone than I had in years. The next afternoon, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law arrived, their usual polished smiles in place. My father-in-law patted my shoulder a little too firmly. We've all been part of this community for years, Olivia. The family name carries weight here. Your husband is only trying to make sure it stays that way. My mother-in-law chimed in, her voice gentle but pointed. Sometimes loyalty means making hard choices for the greater good. Their words landed like quiet accusations, and I felt my husband's eyes on me the whole time, waiting for me to fold. I excused myself to the kitchen for a moment, heart pounding, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending this was just a normal disagreement. The following morning, I drove straight to the small hospital on the edge of town. Dr. Elena Vargas, the records administrator I had worked with on several compliance projects, met me in her office. She was professional and kind, pulling up the files after I explained the situation in the vaguest terms possible. These records are restricted, she said carefully, but since you're listed on the trust documentation, I can show you the recent access logs. What I saw on the screen made my stomach drop. Multiple views by an external firm linked to my husband's workplace. Notes that didn't match anything I remembered about my grandparents' health history. Dr. Vargas frowned as she scrolled. There are annotations here that looks altered. I'm not supposed to say this, but if this is tied to any financial decisions, you might want to get a second opinion from a lawyer. I left the hospital feeling dizzy, the mountain road back to our development blurring slightly through unshed tears. My husband wasn't just pressuring me, he and Amanda had been actively digging, possibly changing things to force my hand. When I got home, I found him in the home office laptop open to what looked like transfer forms. I stood in the doorway, voice trembling but determined. I saw the access logs today. Why is Amanda looking at my family's medical files? He closed the laptop a little too quickly. Olivia, you're blowing this out of proportion. We're trying to protect you. Protect us from the mess your family left behind. His words were meant to soothe, but they only made the hurt deeper, like he was rewriting our entire shared history right in front of me. That evening, I confided in Hannah over a quick coffee at the community cafe. She listened, then said softly, You don't have to decide anything tonight, but if there's fraud involved even within the family name, you deserve the truth before you sign anything away. Her support felt like the only solid ground I had left, yet as I drove home, the weight of my husband's expectations pressed heavier. The private development was quiet under the evening lights, but inside our home, the tension was thick enough to cut. The next afternoon, Hannah called me at work, her voice urgent but low. I pulled some community security footage from the development's shared drive Derek Lawson gave me limited access after I explained it was a personal records issue. You need to see this. She sent me a secure link, and when I opened it on my laptop in the empty staff room, the clip hit me like another quiet blow. It showed my husband and Amanda Klein meeting late one evening in the parking lot near the community clubhouse, heads close together over a laptop. The timestamp matched the exact day the hospital file annotations had been added. They weren't just coworkers discussing a deal, they were coordinating something that involved my inheritance, and the way my husband leaned in toward her, laughing at something on the screen, made my stomach drop in a way I wasn't prepared for. I closed the laptop slowly, tears slipping down my cheeks before I could stop them. Hannah's text followed right after "I'm here if you need to talk." You don't have to do this alone. But in that moment, I did feel alone, the emotional weight of it all pressing down until breathing felt difficult. My husband had always been the one I turned to, the one who made me feel safe in this private community where everything looked perfect on the surface. Now that safety felt like it had been built on sand, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending it was solid. That night when he came home, I showed him the security footage clip on my phone, my voice barely above a whisper. "Explain this to me, please. I need to understand why you and Amanda are going through my family's medical records like this." His face went still, and for a second, I saw the man I loved flicker behind the frustration. Then his tone shifted sharp and personal in a way that cut deep. "You're really going to accuse me of something after everything I've done to keep our life stable here? Amanda is helping because she actually gets how these things work. Unlike you right now, who seems determined to make this harder than it has to be." Those words landed like a quiet slap, and I felt tears well up again, hot and unwanted. I didn't argue further that night. I just stood there vulnerable and exposed the quiet strength I was trying to find, still buried under layers of hurt. Later that night, after he had come back inside and gone to bed without another word, my phone lit up with a new message. It was from an unknown number, but the preview made my heart stop. It was a screenshot of part of the transfer paperwork, already partially filled out with my husband's signature and Amanda's firm listed as the processing contact. Attached was a short note: "Derek Lawson expects the disclosure by tomorrow, or the community board will review the entire trust for fraud indicators. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at the screen, the vulnerability I had been carrying all day mixing with a cold, quiet fear. The last document I needed to see, the one that would flip the entire story, was still waiting in my email from Dr. Vargas, but opening it now felt like stepping off a cliff I wasn't sure I was ready for. I sat there in the dim light of the kitchen, the phone still glowing in my hand with that anonymous message about Derek Lawson and the association meeting looming tomorrow. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat, but I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. With shaky fingers, I opened the email from Dr. Elena Vargas that had been waiting unread in my inbox. The attachment was labeled simply "Final Trust Audit Summary Unaltered." I clicked it, and as the document loaded, the vulnerability I had been carrying for days sharpened into something raw and aching. This was the last piece, the one that would either confirm my worst fears or give me a way out. I scrolled slowly, tears blurring the screen before I could even focus. What I read hit me like a quiet wave that pulled the ground out from under me all over again. The hospital files had never shown fraud on my grandparents' side at all. The annotations Amanda had added, the discrepancies my husband kept pushing, they were all fabricated. The real issue was buried deeper. My husband's family name, the one my father-in-law and my mother-in-law had built so carefully in this private development, was the one hiding years of financial shortcuts. Old Lean's misreported medical claims from years ago that they had used to prop up their reputation, and now my husband and Amanda had been trying to shift the blame onto my inheritance to quietly siphon the funds and cover their own mounting debts at the real estate firm. The final page was a legal note from the trust administrator, timestamped just 2 days earlier, confirming that any forced transfer would trigger a full community disclosure review. My husband's plan wasn't protection, it was a calculated move to rewrite the story so his side stayed clean while I handed over everything I had been promised. The tears came then hot and silent as I sat alone at the table. I wasn't angry in the loud way I thought I would be. It was a deeper, more vulnerable hurt, the kind that settles in your chest and makes every breath feel heavy. This man I had loved, the one I had built a life with in this beautiful gated community, had been willing to twist my grandparents' legacy and involve his coworker in something so personal just to save face. I wiped my eyes and printed the document, folding it carefully into my bag alongside the security footage clip Hannah had sent me. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending this was just a misunderstanding. The next morning, my husband was already dressed and pacing the living room when I came downstairs. He looked at me with that mix of concern and expectation I had come to dread. Olivia, the association meeting is this afternoon. Derek Lawson texted me again. He needs the trust disclosure by noon, or he's flagging it for the whole board. Please tell me you're ready to sign. His voice was softer than before, almost pleading, but I could hear the edge underneath. I stood there in the doorway, the folder heavy in my hands, and felt the vulnerability rise up again like a tide I couldn't hold back. I saw the final document last night, I said quietly, my voice trembling but clear. It doesn't say what you told me it did. The fraud wasn't on my side. It was yours, and your parents, and you and Amanda were trying to cover it by taking my inheritance. He froze, the color draining from his face for just a second before he recovered with a sharp laugh that didn't sound like him at all. You're really going to believe some old hospital printout over me Amanda was only helping because she knows how these things work. My parents have given everything to this community. My father-in-law and my mother-in-law have hosted every fundraiser, every neighborhood event. If this gets out, it's not just us, it's the whole family name. He stepped closer, his tone turning personal and cutting in a way that made my stomach twist. Loyalty means standing by me on this, Olivia, not digging up old paperwork to make me look bad. The words landed like a quiet blow, and I felt the tears prick at my eyes again. But I didn't look away. Hannah had offered to come with me to the meeting, and Dr. Elena Vargas had already sent a notarized statement confirming the unaltered records. I had spent the early hours of the morning meeting with Marcus Reed, a quiet family attorney Hannah recommended, who reviewed everything and advised me on my rights. He was methodical and kind, explaining that I didn't have to sign anything and that the community board couldn't force me. His words gave me just enough strength to stand there now. I'm not signing. I told my husband, my voice soft but steady despite how much it hurt to say it, and I'm not going to let you rewrite what happened. The association meeting was held in the clubhouse at the center of our private development. The room was filled with familiar faces, neighbors who had waved at us during evening walks, couples we had shared dinners with. Derek Lawson stood at the front, his usual polished demeanor in place as he called the meeting to order. My husband sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee like nothing was wrong, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. Amanda Klein was there too, a few rows back, her eyes flicking toward us with that same professional smile she always wore at work events. When Derek mentioned the pending trust disclosure for our property, my husband leaned in close. This is your last chance, Olivia. Sign it now and we can fix this quietly. His whisper was laced with that same cold reality check from our first conversation, but this time it only made the ache in my chest deeper. I stood up slowly, the folder in my hands, and walked to the front of the room. The vulnerability I felt was overwhelming. My hands were shaking, my voice would probably crack. But I spoke anyway, keeping it simple and honest. I won't be signing the transfer today. I said, my tone quiet and trembling, but clear enough for everyone to hear. The hospital files and the final trust document show that the issues were never on my grandparents' side. They were fabricated to cover other problems. I have the security footage and the unaltered records here if anyone needs to see them. The room went still. Derek Lawson's eyebrows rose and a few neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My husband stood up quickly, his face flushed. Olivia, this is not the place. But my father-in-law and my mother-in-law were already exchanging glances from their seats near the front, their polished expressions cracking just enough for me to see the panic underneath. Amanda stayed seated, her smile frozen in place. I didn't raise my voice or accuse anyone dramatically. I simply placed the folder on the table in front of Derek and stepped back. I'm choosing to protect what was left to me, I said softly, looking directly at my husband for the last time in that room. And I'm asking for space to do that. The meeting ended in a murmur of uncomfortable conversations. No one shouted or caused a scene. This was still our private community after all, but the damage was done in quiet ways. Whispers followed us out the door. My father in law and my mother in law left without saying goodbye. Amanda slipped out a side exit. My husband walked beside me to the car in heavy silence, his jaw tight. When we got home, he finally spoke, his voice low and edged with frustration. You just embarrassed the entire family in front of everyone we know. My parents are mortified. Amanda's already getting questions at the office. Is this really what you want to tear everything apart because you couldn't trust me to handle it? I stood in our living room, the same room where we had planned our future, and felt the tears fall freely now. The vulnerability was all there on the surface, raw and exposed, but underneath it, something quieter was settling in a fierce resolve that didn't need to fight back loudly. I did trust you, I whispered, my voice breaking. But loyalty isn't the same as handing over everything I have just because it's easier for you and your family. I can't keep pretending anymore. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head and grabbed his keys. Fine. If that's how you feel, maybe we both need time apart. The door closed behind him and the house fell into a silence that felt both terrifying and strangely peaceful. The days that followed were some of the loneliest I had ever known. My husband moved into a short-term rental a few streets over, saying it was temporary while we figured things out, but we both knew it wasn't. My father-in-law and my mother-in-law stopped answering my calls. The neighbors who used to wave now offered polite but distant smiles when I passed them on walks. Even the community cafe felt a little emptier. Hannah Torres checked on me every day, bringing coffee and sitting with me on the back patio while I cried through the hardest parts. Dr. Elena Vargas sent a gentle follow-up note confirming the records were now fully protected under my name. Marcus Reed helped me file the necessary paperwork to secure the inheritance without any transfer. They were there, steady and kind, but they couldn't fill the space where my husband and his family had once been. I spent long evenings alone in the house we had chosen together, sorting through old photos and memories with a quiet ache in my chest. The private development outside my windows still looked perfect, the mountains in the distance, the neat lawns, the familiar streets, but inside I was learning to sit with the isolation without trying to fix it. There was no dramatic revenge, no public takedown that left me feeling triumphant. The exposure had damaged reputations in small lingering ways, but it didn't bring me any sense of winning. It just left me standing in the quiet truth. Loyalty had never been obligation, and I had finally chosen not to carry what wasn't mine to hold. 6 weeks later, I sat on the same patio where Hannah and I had talked so many times, a soft breeze moving through the trees. My husband had officially asked for separation papers. The inner circle I had once relied on, my husband, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, even the easy camaraderie with Amanda at company events was gone. The community still functioned around me, but I moved through it with a gentle distance, no longer trying to belong in the same way. I felt the loneliness, some nights deep and heavy, but it was mixed now with a lingering, quiet strength that surprised me. I had walked away, not because I stopped caring, but because I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't betrayal, it was the only honest thing left to do. Loyalty is not obligation. I learned that the hard way in the most vulnerable moments when everything I thought I knew about my marriage crumbled. Sometimes choosing yourself means sitting in the quiet after the storm, even when the house feels too big and the nights feel too still. I still believe in love and trust, but I also believe in the peace that comes when you stop carrying someone else's secrets to keep the peace. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just here in this beautiful community I once shared with someone else, learning to make it mine again in the gentlest way possible. Thank you for listening to my story. Where do you draw the line when the person you love most starts asking you to ignore the truth for the sake of family loyalty? I'd love to hear where you would have drawn yours.